If you enjoy stories where the betrayal is polite, the humiliation is public, and the revenge is quiet but permanent, this one starts with a mother-in-law who just wants to help and ends with her watching an entire town finally see her clearly. If that's your kind of story, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is exactly how Brenda tried to erase me and learned too late that I was never weak. I was waiting. My name is Claire Whitman. For 12 years, I tried to be the calm wife, the steady mom, the woman who never made things awkward at family gatherings. I swallowed slights and smoothed conflicts because everyone told me the same thing. Brenda means well. Brenda is old-fashioned. Brenda just loves hard. Daniel, my husband, said it most. He'd kiss my forehead and tell me his mom only got intense because she cared. He said it with the innocence of a man who'd never been the target. And I believed him, because loving hard sounded like a compliment, until I learned it was a warning. We lived outside Columbus, Ohio, in a neat neighborhood with porch lights and polite waves. Our daughter Emily was 8, our son Mason was 5, and our life looked stable from the street. Brenda lived 25 minutes away, close enough to appear uninvited, far enough to demand gratitude for driving all this way. On our wedding day, Brenda hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe and whispered, "Take care of my boy." I thought it was sweet. I didn't notice she never said she was happy he found me, only that I was now responsible for what she believed she owned. The first year, her control wore perfume. She praised my cooking and then brought over a casserole just in case. She complimented my home and then rearranged my pantry when I wasn't looking. She said, "I'm not judging," while judging with the precision of a surgeon, and I learned to laugh so people wouldn't see the sting. When I got pregnant with Emily, Brenda threw a baby shower that looked like a magazine spread. She chose the theme, the guest list, the cake, and even the big icing letters that read Grandma Brenda, larger than my name. Daniel smiled through photos like he was watching his mother win a medal. After Emily was born, the nurse tried to hand my baby to me, and Brenda stepped forward like it was her turn. She held Emily and cooed, "My baby," and Daniel laughed because he thought it was just a phrase. It wasn't a phrase, it was a claim. As Emily grew, Brenda narrated her life like an author. She bought the first holiday dress, chose the first ballet shoes, posted pictures with captions like, "My world," and somehow my face was always cropped, a background prop holding the light. Daniel worked logistics for a medical supplier. The pay was steady, the hours weren't, and whenever he traveled or ran late, Brenda appeared with soup and suggestions. She asked questions that sounded like concern until you realized the answers were tools. How much do you have saved? Is Daniel on your life insurance? Are you working enough, Claire? Kids need their mothers. I didn't understand the pattern until my miscarriage between Emily and Mason. It was early, but it was real, and the grief hit me like a trap door. Brenda sent flowers with a note that read, "Everything happens for a reason. No, I'm sorry, no, I'm here." Just a sentence designed to make pain inconvenient. At a family dinner afterward, she patted my hand and murmured, "Maybe your body knew it wasn't the right time." Daniel didn't react. He didn't hear it or didn't know what to do with it. Either way, Brenda learned the most important thing about me. I could be hurt without making a scene. Mason was born healthy and loud, and Brenda treated his arrival like a second chance to cement her legacy. She told people Emily was Daniel's twin, and Mason was pure Whitman stock. She kept insisting the kids didn't get my side, like my genes were a flaw that might fade. Then she asked Daniel to add her to our savings account in case something happens. Daniel told me like he was mentioning toothpaste. "She's good with numbers," he said. "She wants us protected." When I hesitated, Brenda cried softly and Daniel looked at me like I'd kicked a puppy, so I agreed. because I thought the alternative was a bigger fight. That choice didn't feel dramatic at the time. It felt like a concession, like a small compromise to keep peace. What it was Brenda writing her name onto our life. Soon she became a fixture at Emily's school and Mason's daycare. She brought cookies for the office staff, asked questions about emergency pickups, and smiled so warmly people assumed she was safe. If a teacher mentioned Emily seemed anxious, Brenda was already nodding, whispering, "She's sensitive," and "her mother is emotional." The first financial, "oh my God," hit as a credit card statement with charges I didn't recognize. Boutique purchases, spa treatments, a hotel weekend in Cincinnati. Daniel swore he didn't make them, then laughed and said maybe Mom used it by accident. She has access. When I called Brenda, she answered like she'd rehearsed. "Oh, sweetheart, yes, I did," she said brightly. "My card had a situation, and I didn't want to bother Daniel." Daniel heard that line and melted. "Of course, Mom," he said, and I realized she'd built a rule in our marriage. She never had to ask me. 2 months later, she paid it back in 3 messy deposits, like she wanted the trail to look confusing. I didn't know then that confusion was her favorite camouflage. Brenda also started suggesting I was forgetful. She'd call Daniel and say, "Claire seemed off today. She forgot Mason's jacket," or "Emily said you were tired again." She never called me with these concerns. She delivered them to my husband like warnings, and he began looking at me like he was waiting for proof. I tried to set boundaries. I asked Daniel to talk to her. He always promised he would, then Brenda would cry, and somehow our conversations ended with him consoling her while I apologized for making things tense. Then Brenda discovered the perfect weapon, public concern. At a family barbecue, she asked loudly if I was eating enough and touched my wrist like I was fragile. She told Daniel's cousins, "I worry Claire isn't coping," with a sweet frown that made her look compassionate. I laughed, but later a cousin's wife pulled me aside and asked if I was okay, like she'd been assigned to monitor me. That was when I understood Brenda wasn't trying to win Daniel's loyalty. She already had it. She was building an audience. The next Thursday, my bank called about suspicious activity. They asked if I'd authorized a transfer from savings into a new account. I hadn't. I logged in and saw $9,800 moved out, labeled temporary holding. My hands shook as I called Brenda. "Oh, yes," Brenda said breezily. "That was me. Don't panic, I moved money to protect it." I asked, "Protect it from what?" She paused just long enough to place the blade. "From impulsive decisions," she said. "When people are stressed, they spend." When Daniel got home, he stared at the transfer, shocked, then exhausted. "She said it's temporary," he murmured. "She said you've been anxious." He didn't ask why his mother was moving our money. He asked why his mother thought I was anxious. That night, I asked him the simplest question. "Do you trust me?" Daniel stared at the carpet and said, "I don't know what to think." I remember the refrigerator hum and the feeling of the floor tilting. Brenda had turned my husband into a man who could doubt me without ever hearing a lie spoken clearly. After that, Daniel became watchful. He asked where I'd been, why I seemed tired, what I'd bought, always in a tone that sounded like concern but felt like accusation. Emily started retreating to her room when Daniel and I spoke, and Mason became clingy, like his body sensed something unsafe. Brenda began coming more often, bringing soups and vitamins like I was sick. She offered girl time with Emily and returned her quieter, guarded. One night, Emily asked me if Daddy was going to leave. When I asked why, she whispered, "Grandma Brenda said sometimes moms leave because they can't handle being moms." I called Brenda and told her not to talk to my child that way again. Brenda's voice turned wounded. "Oh, Claire, I never said that," she said. "Emily must have misunderstood. Children dramatize. Maybe she's picking up on your tension. She always did that. If something hurt, it was because I was too sensitive. If something was wrong, it was because I was unstable." Something inside me went quiet that night. Not dead, quiet, like a door closing. I stopped trying to argue my way out of the story Brenda was writing, and I started collecting proof. I opened a new email account and forwarded every bank alert. I screenshot every text. I wrote dates and exact phrases in a folder labeled insurance quotes because Brenda snooped. I also did something I'd never done before. I met with a lawyer. His name was Marcus Bell, and he listened without smiling or minimizing. When I showed him the transfers and the messages, his face tightened. "She's building a case," he said. "Socially first, legally next. She's poisoning the room so you'll be blamed for the smell." I asked what she wanted. Marcus said control, access, maybe money, maybe custody leverage. Mostly, she wants to be the hero in a story where you're the villain. I left his office with my hands trembling on the steering wheel because naming it made it real. Brenda shifted tactics and began isolating Daniel with comfort. She invited him to just a quick dinner on hard days, sent him home with leftovers and quiet sadness, and sighed about how his late father would be disappointed. Daniel started taking calls outside, lowering his voice, coming home pre-defensive. One night I came downstairs for water and heard him on the porch whispering, "I don't know what to do." Brenda's voice floated through the speaker. "I've been saying it, Daniel. She needs help. You can't keep pretending." I backed into the hallway, heart pounding, and understood she wasn't suggesting anymore. She was recruiting. The next "oh my God" arrived as a calendar invite. Daniel told me we had couples counseling on Friday. "Mom found someone great," he said, "her friend's therapist." My stomach dropped. Brenda was choosing our therapist, which meant she was choosing our record. The therapist, Dr. Harlan, greeted Daniel with familiarity and glanced at me like I was a complication. In session, he asked Daniel how he felt at home. Daniel said, "Worried. Claire's been stressed." Dr. Harlan turned to me and asked if I struggled regulating emotions. When I mentioned Brenda's interference, he suggested I interpret help as control. It wasn't therapy. It was an audition, and Brenda had already coached the judges. Marcus warned me afterward, "Stop speaking freely in sessions. Those notes can be used against you." I found my own therapist, Dr. Anika Patel, and documented my care on my terms. A week later, my manager at the dental office called me in and said someone had phoned with concerns about your stability. She insisted she wasn't accusing me, which is what people say when rumor has already landed. I drove home gripping the wheel, realizing Brenda was expanding her audience beyond family. That evening, Brenda arrived with a pie, smiling like a saint. She walked into my kitchen without being invited and sat at my table like she owned it. She scanned my face for cracks while she asked the kids about school, and when she found none, her smile tightened like she was disappointed. Then came the smaller twist that cut deeper than it looked. Emily's teacher emailed that Emily's emergency contacts had been updated. Brenda listed first, me second. The form had "approved by Daniel Whitman" at the bottom. I went to the school, saw the paperwork, and my stomach turned. Daniel's signature was there, but it wasn't his. Brenda had forged my husband's name to put herself between me and my child in an emergency. When I showed Daniel, he went pale. He called Brenda, and for a moment, I thought this would be the line he finally drew. Brenda cried and claimed she was just worried. Then she said softly, "If you choose her, you'll regret it." And I watched Daniel's childhood guilt snap back into place. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight on Brenda's terms. I wasn't going to beg for belief. People like Brenda thrive in fog, and I was going to bring light, even if it burned. Marcus pulled bank histories Brenda couldn't tidy. We found patterns, small withdrawals labeled like fees, transfers, temporary holds. Over 2 years, nearly $30,000 had drifted out of our life into hers. She hadn't protected our money, she'd siphoned it, slowly enough to feel normal. Then, the major shock arrived in a certified letter. It was a default notice for a personal loan, $25,000, taken out 6 months earlier with our home tied to it. Daniel hadn't applied. The signature wasn't his, and the co-signer line read Brenda Whitman. I took the letter to Marcus. He studied it and said, "This is fraud, identity theft, and leverage. She's put a shadow over your house." Then he added, "People like her make mistakes when they panic. We need to make her panic." When Daniel confronted Brenda, she didn't deny it. She cried and said she had to, because she was protecting the kids, because I was unstable, because she needed funds set aside in case the children required a safe place. She said it like a prayer, like she'd practiced it. Then she whispered, "If you turn on me, I'll tell them everything." "Everything?" Daniel asked. Brenda said, "I have documentation." My blood went cold. The notes, the therapist, the school form, she'd built a whole fake reality, and she was ready to unleash it. When Daniel hung up, he paced, and then asked me, broken, "What if she's right? What if you do need help?" I stared at him and said, "Your mother committed fraud, and you're asking if I'm the problem?" He cried, but his tears didn't erase the betrayal. They only proved how deep her training went. Marcus filed an emergency injunction to freeze accounts and prevent further transactions. Daniel agreed to report the fraud to the bank and lender, his hands shaking as he signed. Within 24 hours, Brenda stormed into our house at 7:12 a.m., pearls flashing, voice loud with righteous pain. She accused me of turning Daniel against her and then tried to use the kids as props. She looked at Emily and said, "Sweetheart, tell Daddy what you told Grandma. Tell him how Mommy gets..." Emily froze, and my heart slammed. Brenda was trying to weaponize my child in real time. Emily's voice shook, then steadied. "I told you I didn't like when you talked about Mom," she said. When Brenda tried to interrupt, Emily continued, louder. "You keep saying Mom might leave. You said Dad would be happier without her. You said if I told anyone, you'd cry and Dad would be mad at me." The room went silent. Brenda's mask slipped in front of witnesses. Daniel's jaw clenched. Brenda snapped that Emily was confused, but the damage was done. The audience wasn't just adults anymore. The truth had spoken through the one person Brenda assumed she controlled. Brenda left in a fury, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. Emily sobbed afterward. Mason cried because everyone was crying, and Daniel held them both like a man waking from a nightmare. I felt steel settle in me because Brenda had made a mistake. She'd staged a scene and been exposed. That afternoon, Brenda posted on Facebook about mental health and protecting grandchildren. She didn't name me. She tagged Daniel, the church, and women from PTA. It was a public execution dressed as compassion, and within minutes, my phone filled with messages. "Are you okay? We're praying. I had no idea." Daniel finally snapped and commented publicly, "This is a lie. You committed fraud in my name. Do not contact my wife." Brenda deleted the post within an hour, but screenshots spread faster than mercy. A woman from church, Nancy, messaged me privately. "Brenda did something like this to my sister-in-law years ago. We all believed her. We shouldn't have." My throat tightened as I read it. I wasn't her first. I was simply her latest. With Marcus's guidance, I met Nancy and 2 other women and showed them receipts. The forged school form, the transfers, the loan notice, the messages. I didn't rant, I didn't dramatize. I let evidence do what arguments never could. Their faces shifted as rumor turned into facts. Meanwhile, the fraud reports triggered deeper digging. Records showed Brenda opened a P.O. box and redirected bank mail. She'd accessed Daniel's credit report. She'd created a custodial savings account for the kids, listing herself as guardian, making small deposits to appear supportive and build a future climb. Then Marcus called me late one evening and said, "We found something worse." The lender had sent the application files. Along with the forged signatures, Brenda submitted a medical letter on professional letterhead claiming I'd been evaluated for a mood disorder and advised to avoid childcare during episodes. It was fake, and its metadata traced back to Brenda's home computer. My hands shook so hard I had to sit. This wasn't family drama. This was a campaign designed to remove me if needed. When Daniel heard about the fake medical letter, he looked like he'd been punched. "I think she wants you gone," he whispered. I answered quietly, "I know." He finally filed a police report against his own mother, and in that moment, the family myth shattered. Brenda retaliated by emailing Daniel's HR with the fake medical letter and claims of a domestic situation. Daniel was called in, humiliated, and warned. He came home pale and said, "She's willing to burn me too." That was when he stopped trying to balance both sides and chose reality. The police obtained a warrant and searched Brenda's house. They found a printer loaded with scanned signatures, blank templates, and a folder labeled Claire, full of notes about my mood, my spending, my parenting. They also found a second folder that made my vision blur, Grandkids Plan. Inside were drafts of an emergency guardianship petition. Brenda had been preparing to file for temporary control of my children based on her fabricated narrative. Daniel threw up in the driveway when he heard. I sat on the kitchen floor and breathed like I was drowning, then stood up and decided she would never get that far. 2 days after the Facebook post, Brenda delivered the next escalation with perfect timing. She called Child Protective Services. I found out because a social worker showed up at my door at 9:30 a.m. with a clipboard and an apologetic smile, asking if she could check on the children. She said a report claimed I'd been emotionally unstable, that I'd screamed for hours, that the kids were afraid to come home, and that Daniel was often away for work. The words sounded like Brenda's handwriting turned into spoken language, and the social worker's eyes flicked over my living room like she expected to find chaos. I invited her in, offered her water, and spoke calmly. I showed her the kids' bedrooms, the pantry, the school schedules on the French. I showed her Emily's art taped to the wall and Mason's little pile of Hot Wheels lined up like soldiers. The social worker asked if we had extended family nearby. I said yes, and one of them is attempting to interfere. Then I handed her copies of the bank alerts and the forged school form. I watched her expression change from polite to alert. She said, carefully, "It's unusual for a reporter to have this level of narrative detail." I nodded. "She's been building a story," I said. "You're part of it." The social worker thanked me, took notes, and left, but the fact that she'd come at all made me nauseous. When Daniel heard, he went rigid with rage. "She called CPS on you," he said, like he couldn't make the words fit inside his mouth. He wanted to call Brenda immediately. Marcus told him not to. "Let her keep moving," Marcus said. "Every move is a receipt." Brenda didn't stop there. She began showing up where she could be seen, always with witnesses. At the grocery store, she accidentally ran into Daniel's coworker's wife and sighed about how hard things were. At church, she asked people to pray for a mother who won't get help. She used my invisibility as a canvas for her kindness. The worst part was the way people reacted. They didn't ask me what was true. They asked me if I was okay, the way you ask someone if they're contagious. They looked at my children with pity, like pity was proof that Brenda must be right. Marcus told me to expect this. Public narratives stick, he said. You don't break them with denial. You break them with specifics. So I kept collecting specifics, and I chose my moments carefully. Thanksgiving arrived like a test. Daniel insisted we skip Brenda's dinner and do our own. Brenda responded by inviting the entire extended family to her house and sending Daniel a group text, "The door is open if you want to bring the kids somewhere stable." Daniel stared at the message, face tightening. I could see the trap. If we didn't go, Brenda would call it isolation. If we went, Brenda would stage a performance. We went anyway, not because I wanted her table, but because I wanted witnesses. Brenda greeted us at the door like a grieving saint. She hugged Daniel too long, then hugged Emily and Mason like she was rescuing them from a storm. When she hugged me, her arms barely touched, but her smile stayed bright enough for photos. The dining room was full of relatives and casseroles and the kind of laughter that avoids hard topics. Brenda waited until everyone was seated and then lifted her wineglass. "I'm thankful," she said sweetly, "for family and for strength in difficult seasons." People murmured. Brenda looked directly at me. "And I'm thankful," she continued, "that Daniel is finally realizing he can't carry everything alone when someone refuses help." Her voice stayed gentle, but the room went quiet in that fragile way quiet rooms get when a bomb has been placed politely on the table. Daniel's cousin asked, "What do you mean?" Brenda sighed, eyes glistening. "I shouldn't say," she whispered, loud enough for everyone. "It's private. I just want Claire to get the support she needs." My stomach clenched, but I held my fork steady. I didn't argue. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper. One page Marcus had prepared for exactly this. It summarized the fraud report number, the disputed loan account, and the school form correction request, without editorial, just facts. I slid it across the table toward Brenda and said evenly, "If you want to discuss our private life in public, we can use documentation." My voice didn't shake. Brenda's eyes flicked down, and for the first time that night, her smile trembled. A hush fell across the room, thicker than gravy. One aunt leaned forward to read. Another cousin stared at Daniel. The narrative shifted in real time, not because I raised my voice, but because I made Brenda's story measurable. Brenda's sister scoffed and said, "This is family. Why are you making it legal?" I looked at her calmly. "Because someone made it criminal," I said, and I didn't take my eyes off Brenda. Brenda tried to recover with tears. She dabbed her eyes and whispered, "I did it to protect the children." Daniel's cousin, usually neutral, asked, "Protect them from what?" Brenda's mouth opened, then closed, because she couldn't say from Claire without sounding like what she was. After dinner, while relatives clustered into whisper groups, Brenda cornered me in the hallway near the coat closet. Her voice dropped, sharp now. "You think you're clever," she hissed. "You think paperwork will save you." I smiled softly. "No," I said. "Truth will." Brenda's eyes flashed with hatred, and in that second I saw the real her. Furious that I wouldn't play the role she wrote. That night, Daniel found another surprise in his email, a notification that a new authorized user had been added to one of his old retirement accounts. The name wasn't mine. It was Brenda's. Daniel stared at the screen, breathing hard, then opened old statements. Slowly, the horror unfolded. Brenda had been dipping into Daniel's retirement for years, tiny withdrawals disguised as administrative adjustments. It wasn't enough to notice month to month, but enough to add up to tens of thousands over time. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed and said, "She's been stealing from me since I was 22. His voice broke, not with anger at money, but with the grief of realizing his entire adulthood had been managed like a bank account she felt entitled to. This was the part people don't understand about control families. It isn't one dramatic act. It's 1,000 quiet permissions that become a cage. Marcus used the retirement evidence to strengthen the criminal report. The prosecutor's office took the new documents seriously because it showed a pattern and a long timeline. The bank flagged additional accounts Brenda had touched, and suddenly the case wasn't just one loan, it was a web. Brenda began unraveling under pressure. She started calling Daniel late at night, leaving voicemails that shifted from sobbing to rage within seconds. "After everything I've done," she'd cry, then snarl, "You ungrateful boy." She couldn't keep the mask on when the audience wasn't watching. One Friday evening, Brenda showed up at Daniel's apartment. He didn't let her in. She stood in the hallway where neighbors could hear and wailed about how I'd stole her son. A neighbor recorded it on their phone and posted it in the building group chat with the caption, "Someone come get their mom." It spread. People laughed. It sounds cruel, but it mattered, because Brenda's power depended on being seen as dignified. Once she became that woman, she lost a layer of armor. Dr. Harlan tried to insert himself again, emailing Daniel about reconsidering family reconciliation. Marcus subpoenaed his billing records. That's when we got another jaw-dropper. Brenda had been paying for Daniel's sessions with Dr. Harlan through a family wellness fund. She wasn't recommending therapy, she was funding a narrative. When that detail surfaced, even Brenda's strongest defenders went quiet. You can excuse worry. You can't easily excuse buying a professional to label someone unstable. The protective order hearing came later, but Thanksgiving and CPS had already cracked the family's confidence. By the time we sat in court, Brenda wasn't just fighting me, she was fighting her own paper trail. After the judge granted restrictions, Brenda tried to appeal socially. She hosted a prayer circle at her house for families impacted by mental illness. She invited women from church and posted photos of hands clasped around candles, as if sympathy could erase evidence. Nancy sent me one of the photos and said, "People are starting to ask why she's doing all this praying instead of explaining the forgery." That made me laugh for the first time in months, a small laugh that felt like air returning to my lungs. The arrest came after, and it was exactly the kind of public fracture Brenda always engineered for others. A patrol car in her driveway, a neighbor's curtain twitching, Brenda's face stiff as officers guided her out. She tried to hold her chin high, but her hands shook. Daniel didn't celebrate. He sat with his head in his hands and whispered, "That's my mom." I touched his shoulder and said, "And these are our kids. Sometimes that's the only choice you get." In the plea process, Brenda kept insisting she acted out of fear, but the prosecutor read her draft guardianship petition aloud in court. Hearing her own words, the courtroom felt colder. It wasn't fear on that page, it was strategy. Emily heard about the plea through overheard adult talk and asked me one night, "Was Grandma trying to take us?" I didn't lie. I said, "She was trying to control us." Emily's eyes welled. Then she said quietly, "I don't want her to control anything anymore." That sentence did something to me. It reminded me that my children were not props in Brenda's story. They were people with instincts, and their instincts had been right. When Brenda later requested supervised visitation, Emily refused. Mason, too young to understand the history, said he didn't like Grandma's mean face. The court listened to them, and that was Brenda's final humiliation. realizing the children she claimed to protect did not choose her. Years will pass, and some people will still call Brenda misunderstood. That's fine. Let them. I'm not living in their comfort anymore. I'm living in a home where mail comes to the right address, where bank accounts are mine, where a grandmother's smile doesn't decide my future. Brenda wanted to erase me, but what she erased instead was her own credibility, her own dignity, and the illusion that she could do anything without consequence. My name is Claire, and this was the last straw. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe.